So it looks like we have a critical mass of folks signed in. So I'd like to welcome our audience and our panelists to today's webinar on managing obsolescence in the Department of Defense. There's a new DoD instruction, DoD instruction 4245.15, diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages management. The term for obsolescence in DoD is that DMSMS, which is a mouthful of an acronym if there ever was one. Just wanted to welcome you all to the discussion. I'm Dr. Jerry McGinn. I'm the Executive Director for the Center of Government Contracting at George Mason University in the School of Business. And I used to be an SES in the Department of Defense, and I dealt a lot with DMSMS. And so we're really excited to have an incredible panel of experts lined up to speak today to you, and we really look forward to your questions and discussions so we can have a great conversation about this important advance and what it means for your office or your company, your line of business, and look forward to that discussion. So the way we're going to run today's panel is first I'm going to give you a short background on the center. Because I think many of you all have not been in touch with the center before. Then I'm going to introduce Robin Brown, who is the OSD lead for DMSMS, and the principal author of the DoD instruction, and then one of her colleagues from DAU, who is learning and resources. And then we're going to hear more after their presentations. We're going to hear from each of the service leads for DMSMS. So. But first, I want to start with a poll. So Charlie Dolgus, if you could put up the poll, please. So I want to get a sense of where folks are coming from. Who's our audience here? We have over 318 folks on the call now, which is just tremendous. It's just a tribute to Robin and the team that there's a tremendous interest across the government contracting community on this topic. So I wanted to, if you could respond to the polls. First, what part of the government contracting community do you represent? Are you government, industry, academia, or not-for-profit? And then, were you familiar with the term DMSMS before today's event? That would be good to know. So as you're answering that poll, we'll move on to the next, which I'm going to walk through a couple slides on the center. So the Center for Government Contracting, I left DoD in 2018, and I came to George Mason to set up the Center for Government Contracting, because there's no university anywhere in the country that's focusing on the business, policy, regulatory issues that you face every day in your role, either in government, in industry, or in academia. So that's our vision, is to be that for the center to be the nexus for addressing these issues. We're a neutral convening authority because we're a university, and we don't fall underneath any other kind of conflicts, FACA rules, the like. So that's our vision. And next slide. And so to do this, to implement this, we have three lines of effort. First is research. We want to be the thought leader on government contracting issues. And so we publish a lot in commentaries, in places like Defense News or The Hill or other journals and the like. We do white papers on more detailed issues like intellectual property, and on budget reform and on building resilience. So that's our research areas. We're doing a big project on acquisition best practices that we're launching later this month. Education and training. So here we want to develop courses and offerings for both academic as well as professional development or executive development offerings for the current and future government contracting workforce. And so we work with our faculty across the School of Business and in other departments of the university, as well as with our executive development team on those efforts. And then finally, collaboration. And these are the events like today's event, where we bring together that industry, government, and academic perspective on the real burning issues facing the overall ecosystem. And when I say government contracting, I use that term very broadly. We are not a contract shop. We are a government. We view ourselves as a convener and helping address these broad business issues, the business of government, and then the company business issues, the regulatory issues and policy issues facing us today. And so that's why today's event is a perfect example of this. So it is a policy issue, and it's one that's sort of bedeviled the department for a number of years. And you saw when you signed up that it's been since 1974 that we've had a overarching document on how do we manage obsolescence in the department. And prior to that, it's been done just by program. And there's the new instruction talks about taking a more risk-based and proactive approach, which I very much welcome and look forward to hearing more about. So what I want to do is, can we get the results of the poll, Charlie? So here we go. So you see, and this is great for our panelists too. We have a great composition. Over 50% are from government, but we also have 40% from companies, and then the rest, another 10% from academia and not-for-profit. That's a great mix, and really exciting to have that here. And interestingly, 90% were familiar with the term DMSMS before this event, which is also good to hear. So we are all acronym aficionados, so that's excellent. So anyway, so that's the poll. So let's go right into find out more about the instruction. And so I'm going to introduce two folks right now. One is Robin Brown, who is the program manager for DMSMS in the Office of Secretary of Defense. And she's been doing DMSMS for the past 20 years. She is really experienced in this area, and she's housed in the Defense Standardization Program Office, but she's also worked in NAVAIR as a DMSMS lead, and and she was at NAVAIR for 15 years, providing DMSMS support across all NAVAIR program offices. She chairs the DoD DMSMS working group, and she also works on parts management as another kind of other day job. So here's the panel that is lined up to speak today. So and then the other person who's going to speak at the front end is Bill Cobran, who's the Director of Logistics and Sustainment Center at DAU, and he's the DAU lead for DMSMS, and he's going to talk about resources that you can that can help you in your role learn more how to apply the points in this instruction. So here are all the speakers that will be speaking throughout the day. Their bios are linked to on the on our website, but I'll do a short introduction to them afterwards. And then two ground rule things. One is that we will pass the slides to you afterwards. So so you're welcome to take notes, but you'll also get the slides. And the second one is we'd love to get you to participate early and often. So if you have a question that you want to throw to Robin now, or you want to tee up, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom to do so. Or the chat function works as well, but the Q&A function is a bit more efficient. So so let me turn it over to Robin and let her take it from here.
All right, can you hear me, Jerry? All right, so I wanted to say good morning. Great, okay, cool. So good morning, everybody. I want to thank Jerry, especially for facilitating this panel, and George Mason University for hosting this town hall, in particular, Charlie and Allison for all of your help. I'd also like to thank all of the DMSMS service leads for doing this with me, and of course to all of you for participating today. I can't believe there's actually almost 400 people dialed in, so I'm really proud and honored that you're willing to spend the next hour and a half with us. I kind of get a little bit distracted because I can see myself while talking. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut off my camera for a little bit, and then I will reappear during Q&A. So I want to start off by saying, as most of you know, DMSMS is inevitable. And it's really becoming more prevalent as a result of things like rapid technology changes, our increased use of COTS items, longer operational lives, of our DoD systems. And DoD really isn't able to influence industry to resolve DMSMS issues because it doesn't have a large enough market share. So DMSMS ill effects include increased opportunities for counterfeit items and malicious insertion in DoD systems, decreased availability, mission capability, safety, which all increases costs. DoD spends at least $2.4 billion annually to resolve DMSMS issues, and more than 90% of these costs are associated with out-of-cycle redesigns that average about $2.3 million. DoD is spending way too much money on DMSMS resolutions, especially for redesigns, and not enough on proactive DMSMS management. Proactive DMSMS management reduces redesign costs by about 50%. So proactive DMSMS management has been limited by the lack of incentives, policy, inconsistent application of best practices, and lack of contract requirements. And the lack of clarity in OSD leadership has also made the problem even worse. The last directive, as Jerry mentioned, was in 1974. And since then, there's been no department-wide policy that clearly defines the requirements for DMSMS. And because of this, program office have varied in their implementation of a comprehensive DMSMS management strategy. Next slide, please. So with all that said, I'm super proud to announce that the new DoD DMSMS management policy is now in effect. On November 5th, the Honorable Ellen Lord signed on this instruction, making it that every program office now needs to have a comprehensive DMSMS management regulations and processes and procedures. Strategically, the DoDI is aimed at reducing the costs that the department incurs to resolve DMSMS issues, as well as mitigating ill effects of those issues on schedule, readiness, things like operational availability. It contains provisions for establishing, verifying compliance with, and enforcing the requirement to conduct this risk-based proactive DMSMS management through some standard practices established in guidance documents that we've created, like SD 22, SD 26, which are guidebooks on DMSMS management and DMSMS contract language. The instruction establishes policy, assigns responsibilities, prescribes procedures for DMSMS management, and it implements risk-based proactive DMSMS management for all DoD material. So that means parts, equipment, assemblies, components, material, and software throughout the entire life cycle, cradle to grave. Now, per this instruction, it is DoD policy to establish and implement risk-based proactive DMSMS management, evaluate all system designs and redesigns for potential DMSMS issues, implement resolutions to minimize or eliminate risks of these negative impacts, and implement improvements to DMSMS management processes. Next slide, please. So to go into this a little bit further, you'll see that the following outlines those responsibilities. So the Undersecretary of Defense for A&S, Acquisition and Sustainment, now are responsible for establishing and implementing acquisition and sustainment policy, procedures, regulations, guidance, and training to minimize the impact of DMSMS on supply chain risk. And also, in addition to that, mitigate DMSMS risk throughout the life cycle of DoD items. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, and you'll notice that the first bullet is similar throughout all of the organizations, so I won't read it, but everyone is responsible in their own organizations for integrating risk-based proactive DMSMS management in all of their policy, their guidance, and their training. In addition to that, they are going to address DMSMS impacts over the life cycle, standardize DMSMS management contract language, and promotes its use in contracts in accordance with the SD26, or standardization-related documents on DMSMS contract language. The ASDA will designate a primary point of contact to serve on the DoD DMSMS working group, and also will support the Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment in overseeing and monitoring the overall effectiveness and efficiency of DMSMS management processes, and continually help in developing improvements. So the next slide. So under the authority, direction, and control of USD A&S, the ASD for sustainment serves as the principal. So this is our champion for DMSMS management within the DoD. This instruction wouldn't have happened without the support and leadership of Ms. Jan Mulligan, Director of Supply of Office of Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Logistics. She has been our champion throughout all of this. And this office establishes the DoD DMSMS working group and designates all individuals to serve as its co-chair. And the instruction actually formalizes for the first time ever the DoD DMSMS working group, which is co-chaired by ASDF, sustainment, and USD R&E, research and engineering. In addition to all of that, the director of the Defense Contract Management Agency, DCMA, will again do that first bullet that I mentioned and integrate all of that into their products that they have. But in addition to that, they're going to develop and implement a surveillance process to report the performance of contractors' DMSMS management activities and identify risks to DoD customers as authorized by contract. They are also going to coordinate communication with the affected DoD components and the DoD DMSMS working group as authorized by contract when DMSMS risks and issues are identified. And they will also designate a POC for the DoD DMSMS working group. Next slide. So as you can see, this is a team effort, and I really believe that we've worked hard to get all the key stakeholders identified in this instruction, and each person knows what their roles and responsibilities are. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial Policy, again, will integrate into policy guidance and training. They are also, which I'm super excited about, communicate industrial-based DMSMS issues to the DoD components and assist with resolutions, and support the ASDS in overseeing and monitoring the overall effectiveness, and establish a priority allocation of industrial resources task force to address critical material shortages, and have a person on the working group as well. So the next slide is the research and engineering folks. And that's the organization and office that I work for. So the Defense Standardization Program Office falls under R&E. And what we are responsible for is including integrated risk-based proactive DMSMS management, again, into policy guidance and training, supports the ASDS in the overseeing and monitoring of the overall effectiveness of what we're doing. In addition to that, though, they are going to provide technical assistance and advice on DMSMS management to DoD components as needed, designate a working group co-chair, and because GIDEP, the Government Industry Data Exchange Program, falls under the Defense Standardization Program Office, we are also going to define DMSMS-related requirements for GIDEP. And later, you'll see that program offices are now required to send their discontinuation notices and resolutions to GIDEP. The next slide the DoD component heads are required to establish, again, that same bullet, everybody is going to incorporate DMSMS management and policy guidance and training, designate a DoD lead office within each DoD component to provide DMSMS management oversight, designate a primary POC for the working group, confirm the adequacy of their DMSMS risk evaluation, mitigation, and resolution during technical reviews. They are required to establish metrics and internal reporting requirements to reduce costs and improve efficiency, required to share information on issues and resolutions within 10 business days of occurrence using guide apps and collaborate on resolutions where feasible, direct supply chain organizations to identify and assess DMSMS issues and risks using supply system data and communicate that information to the responsible DMSMS organizations or program offices, and direct acquisition programs and other organizations responsible for DMSMS to support those programs and implement the following DMSMS procedures. Next slide. So all of these folks listed here, in addition to their responsibilities that I've just outlined, provide DMSMS management direction and oversight to program offices and other DMSMS management performing organizations under each of their official purview. And then the next slide, we go down to the program offices. And other organizations responsible for DMSMS management are required to develop a DMSMS management plan, collect case and management operations data, and use the data, direct consideration of DMSMS when designing new items and redesigning existing items. I think that was my hook into part selection and the parts management. Ensuring that you're building DMSMS resilient design and not designing in obsolescence. Mitigate DMSMS risks and issues to minimize and eliminate their impact. You all have to program and budget for your DMSMS operations and resolutions. Include provisions in your contracts and requests for proposals to conduct DMSMS management, and specify requirements for contractors and their suppliers to report information needed for the government to have oversight and to provide access, delivery, technical data rights, things like indentured bills of materials, drawings, models, supportability information that are necessary to perform proactive risk-based DMSMS management, establish a DMSMS exit strategy for life cycle phase changes, contract transitions, or similar situations, and resolve DMSMS issues in a timely manner. Communicate with supply organizations, train your DMSMS workforce, and evaluate DMSMS management activities in your logistics assessments and your technical reviews. And then my last slide. So in conclusion, what does this instruction do for us? So I believe it gives us clear direction to higher level organizations to establish policy and guidance for DMSMS management. And really this is important because it provides continuity of practice across all organizations that deal with DMSMS issues. It also requires DoD component heads to establish, develop, implement risk-based proactive policy, procedures, regulations, guidance, and training. There hasn't been a clear requirement for DMSMS management for many decades. So this instruction requires that DMSMS management be integrated in all aspects of DoD equipment, from development to disposal for all ACAT programs. It also standardizes DMSMS management requirements across the services. This should enable collaboration at a level that we've not yet experienced, and the institution of proactive DMSMS management in all organizations that have military equipment. And plus, last but not least, will save, this should be saving the government money and increase readiness. So that is all that I have for now, Jerry.
Awesome. That's great, Robin. Before we turn to Bill, we already got questions coming in. I just want to throw one at you. And it's exciting to have this instruction. And I really applaud the risk-based proactive approach to DMSMS. I'm wondering if you could, how is that going to be articulated, because the direction is that each of the services will do this. Are they going to do pilot programs? Are you going to give them guidance or templates to be able to, what exactly does that mean by risk-based and proactive? And then also on the DMS planning for ACAT 1 programs and so on, are you going to help is the working group going to help develop procedures so that we can start doing this, implementing this?
Unmute myself. I need to unmute myself. That's a great question, and it's actually a perfect transition into Bill's slides, to his presentation. We have, and I'm super proud of this, and I don't know how the heck it happened. It was not planned, but you'll see, when Bill speaks, we have created either guidance, training, or a product of some sort to help program offices be successful in meeting every one of these requirements in this instruction. And in addition to that, I failed to mention, the service leads actually helped me write this instruction. And we were very careful about putting requirements on program offices that wouldn't be helpful. Eric Grotus from the Navy was instrumental in reminding me every day that we worked on this thing for almost 2 years. Let's fix a challenge that the program offices are currently having. Let's give them tools and support that they've been asking for the past 20, maybe even 30 years for Eric. So we do have a lot of information and resources to share with you all.
Great. All right. Well, then that's great. Well, Robin, we're going to come back to you with some questions, but let's dive right into Bill. Talk about some of the research that you and Robin and the team developed for this effort.
You bet. Can you hear me?
Yep. Great.
All right. So much to say and so little time to say it. So I'm going to keep this fast and short. The next slide, please. I think most of you are familiar with DAU as a training institution for the Department of Defense, specifically for the defense acquisition workforce. But what I will tell you is these learning assets that we've collaboratively developed with Robin and her team, and it is a model of collaboration, I will say, allow us the opportunity not only to speak to the acquisition workforce, but to the broader DoD workforce and frankly, to our industry partners and colleagues as well. So everything I show you on this slide is available and accessible whether you're government or not. So please encourage you to take advantage of some of these. So collaboratively, we've worked on and developed and continue to update these 5 courses, training courses. They're all online, web-based training. All of them are in revision for this current year. So we're making updates, obviously, to adapt to the reality of the new policy, as well as updates that we expect coming in terms of DoD guidance, as well as some of the commercial products as well. We also work with the team on 2 knowledge sharing portals, which we host. We don't own them, the team does, but for DMSMS and parts management, as well as linking to and listing a number of DMSMS related tools. We also maintain a copy of the SD22 as one of what we call our Big 12 product support related guidebooks. We do host that as well. Go ahead to the next slide, please, if you would, because this is where I really want to kind of focus attention. So DAU is in the midst of a major transformation right now as a result of and in conjunction with the new DoD back to basics transformation of the acquisition workforce. If you need more information on that initiative, I highly encourage you to go to the Human Capital Initiatives Office website, hci.mil, And you can find some specific information on that. It's just called Back to Basics, but it's streamlining and aligning and realigning the acquisition workforce. So that'll be a number of initiatives there rolling out over the next 12 to 18 months. One of them is a major push from within DAU and from OSD as well to create a series of credentials specifically to move beyond just specific training courses, but to provide more personalized learning opportunities and to demonstrate some proficiency in those areas, not just to learn information and knowledge. So far, if you need some information, if you just go to our DAU homepage, you can find a whole slew of resources, including frequently asked questions. And then there's 9 early, I won't say prototypes, but early credentials that have already deployed. None of them are logistics specific yet. But if you go to the next slide, we have in the lifecycle logistics arena, 15 planned credentials. They are built around the 12 integrated product support elements. There's so much going on in those arenas that we couldn't fit them all into 12 credentials. So we have 15 planned. What I think you'll like, because I know there's many folks from multiple functional backgrounds here on this call, is this includes not just logistics and lifecycle logisticians, but systems engineers, production quality manufacturing, program managers, contracting specialists, and so forth. And if you look in deep dive into what we are currently proposing for each of these credentials, you will find not just logistics training courses, but also courses from other functional domains. The assessments on each of these credentials are going to be scenario-based, proficiency demonstrated-based. So again, we move beyond just sharing of knowledge and actually say, let's go do something as part of it. As part of this effort, we have one of these logistics credentials that we call, it's designated as CLCL 04, Parts and Material Lifecycle Management. And that is, actually we built that in conjunction with and working with the working group to identify the courseware, including those 5 courses that I already mentioned earlier on the previous slide, plus others, very interdisciplinary, to prepare to provide this to our broader workforce. We're very excited about this one. We're just getting ready to start development because we're doing these in various tranches. We'll start development on this one probably after the beginning of the new year, but the target deployment date is going to be in September, and we'll just keep everybody apprised of that, certainly through the working group as well as through other events and on our website as well. So with that, kind of give you a taste of what's to come. We're excited about it, and we continue to look forward to work with the team and with the community.
Great. Hey, Bill, I got a specific question for you. One of the Paul Crimmins asked, is the training modules developed, are they solely based on SD 2022 and SD 2026 or 26, or does it incorporate IEC 62402 2019 also? So,
yeah, primarily today, they are primarily on the SD 22 and 26. Again, these are in development and update, not development, but in revision and update this year. So as the team seeks to go, we'll look to make those updates as appropriate.
Yeah, I wanted to mention a couple things as well. So the SD22 DMSMS guidebook is going to be, the new one, the December 2020, is going to be published this week. So in addition to everything that Bill just mentioned, we have 100 new pages, riveting information for you all to read. It's going to be super helpful to you if you have trouble sleeping at night. It'll definitely put you to sleep. But anyway, some of the things that we've added to the new SD22 are things like how to program and budget, how to build bills of materials if you haven't received them, how to incorporate, DMSMS language into your contracts. Again, all the requirements, new software guidance on software DMSMS management. So stay tuned for that. In addition to that, I will be starting coordination of a new DoDM, a DoD manual on DMSMS management in the next week or two. Those are also that is going to help you with figuring out what the procedures are that are outlined in the in the instruction. But all the information is in the new SD22 anyway. It's a perfect transition. I think all of those 3 or 4, including SD26, complement each other very well. And all of it is aligned to the IEC standard, the international standard that I just adopted last year as well. And we are helping with SAE 0016 standard, updating that on DMSMS management plans. So all of that is, in my opinion, very much aligned with each other, in addition to the DAU courses that we have.
Robin, one other question, if I could, that's in the chat. It was related to the IPS-based credentials. I just wanted to answer that one real quickly. Yes, there are 3 credentials actually proposed for product support analysis. There's so much to talk about in that arena that we have 3 identified with potential metrics. Absolutely, yes. And there will be a separate one actually on technical data management, product data management kinds of topics as well.
Great. Before I turn to the service leads, I want to ask one more kind of general question that's come up in a couple of questions for Robin. And then the service leads, I'd love for your responses to this too. The question is you know, we laid out some good guidance here, but, you know, at the end of the day, the buck stops where in terms of who pays for DMSMS management? Is it by program? Is it industry supposed to cover it? Is there any guidance on that? Or is that left to part of the development of the DMSMS plan in the program? You know, can you speak to that at all, Robin?
Yeah, I think that if you look at, you know, a lot of our policy documents, like DMSMS management is in the new 5000, part selection, better part selection is in there as well. I think it's included in the overall programmatic, you know, things that you should think about and prioritize and look at as you're building, as you're programming and budgeting. For DMSMS management. If you have a good technology road mapping plan and roadmap, it's going to be easier for you and in addition, I mean, seriously, if you have a proactive DMSMS management program, it's going to buy you time to be able to make more cost-effective decisions. You know, there in the new SD22, there are strategies for going about and doing that. Whenever I think of that question, I always think back to when I was at Navier and I sat down with a PSM. He said, Robin, I would love to do what you're doing, but I can't because I have 10 priorities. I only got funded for 6 and DMSMS management is number 8 on my list. I said to him, well, give us an example of something that is, you know, causing you to pull your hair out. He said, well, here you go. We're facing a $2 million redesign on this part because we can't get it. We lucked out, but I believe there are thousands and thousands of examples of this. Within 2 weeks, we were able to find a $10,000 solution. And that is just one example of thousands. So I'm a firm believer that, you know, if you don't do this and budget up front, you're going to end up spending a heck of a lot more money, you know, in the future, especially in sustainment and even in production. So it's the type of pay me now or pay me later, pay me more later. We need to change that mindset and we need to budget for this just like we do. You know, things like corrosion and some other really key important things that are affecting readiness within our systems. And I'm sure the service leads can help me with that question as well.
Great.
Yes, this is Daphne Henry, Army Service Lead, and I would just like to echo what Robin Brown was saying, but also one of the things that the Army has planned for the FY21 and FY22 is really strengthening our success story repository so that when we have instances like this, we have success stories readily available that we can share. And you know, as Robin was saying, those success stories really will delineate, you know, the advantages from a cost, but also schedule readiness perspective. And then those can be utilized to strengthen why it's going to be a good thing for the palming to occur for the programs that may be a little resistant. Over.
Great. Daphne, since you spoke first, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you and ask you a question. It's great to have you here representing the Army. Daphne Henry is the Army lead for DMSMS, and her previous experiences include a lot of years working obsolescence as an engineer and for the Apache Program Office, the Propulsion Integrated Project Team lead, and then the executive officer for a CCDC engineering directorate. And Daphne also has a unique perspective because she spent 15 years as in the automotive industry on manufacturing engineering and parts management roles prior to becoming a government civilian. So I wanted to ask you, given your experience leading obsolescence efforts and your previous private sector experience, Daphne, what impact do you expect that this new instruction will have in the Army?
I think the purpose that outlines that's at the beginning of the instruction that really talks about the integration and implementation of a risk-based proactive DMS throughout the life cycle. I think those are just optimal words that really depict what the greatest benefit will be. Robin also touched on something that I think it's so important. It's the continuity of practice. I think we've had proactive, or we do have proactive risk-based obsolescence, DMSMS management currently. However, I think this instruction will be a home run when it comes to continuity of practice. From an Army perspective, especially the fact that we have the Army Futures Command now, and all the way through AMC, we are all involved in that strategic working group that's just recently been stood up. So I really think the continuity of practice is one of the great benefits we'll see, and the timing of the release of this instruction is impeccable to start to embrace that continuity of practice. Over.
Great. That's a great continuity of practice. That's a great way to put it. Now I'd like to turn to the Air Force lead, Dr. Stanley Rogers, who is he's the new lead for Enterprise DMSMS within the Air Force, and Air Force Material Command. Has got over 35 years of government, industry, military experiences, and he's retired from the U.S. Air Force with 30 years of requirements planning and logistics, and we're really excited to have him here. And so, Stanley, how has the Air Force traditionally handled obsolescence across the service, and how do you see this new instruction impacting the Air Force?
Okay, so can you hear me? So on behalf of the Air Force and the Air Force Material Command, I just really want to thank all of you for the opportunity to participate in this town hall discussion on managing, obsolescence. I simply want to give a shout out to the Air Force community who has participated in building this DODI. And I want to thank them for all they've done in making sure that the Air Force and the warfighter has, built a DMSMS, policy, okay, to enable the best capabilities going forward. Okay. I'm the new guy, so I'm kind of only been in position for about 3 months. So I'm bringing new perspectives to what the Air Force is doing with DMSMS. But before I answer those questions, let me just give a shout out again to Robin for all of her excellent and awesome leadership. Okay, I believe the whole DMS community has benefited from you and what you've been doing collectively with the services and components. And Bill, when you were talking about those training charts, we had a Air Force meeting this morning, and somebody was asking about the training opportunities. So please share that information with us as well. We want to make sure that we get that to the right people. Now, with respect to that first question, how has the Air Force traditionally handled obsolescence across the Air Force? I guess the key and operative word is traditional. Okay, I immediately think of Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Know thyself, know thy enemy. Okay, so the Air Force has always recognized the need to manage and balance on a daily basis. And Jerry, this gets to your who pays, okay? On a daily basis to manage our war fighters enabling capabilities from concept to disposal across our FIDUP, considering near, mid, far posture requirements based on threat and intel data, scenario based. That's how we do it in the Air Force. And I would expect that across all the services, they pretty much do it the same. With that mission comes the understanding that the Air Force continues as a requirement to appropriately address manufacturing sources and data right challenges as the Air Force balances Air Force priorities, risks, proactively, of course, and fiscal constraints. Traditionally, we've kept our bird flying for decades sometimes based on our risk mitigation calculus. And we recognize that our contracted manufacturing bases, when requested to sustain a bird for 30 to 50 years beyond the original conception or fielding, may not see the continued payoff in maintaining that bird for 30 or 50 more years. You know, there's an old capability. So if their price points don't match, we understand that, because it's hard to sustain something that's 50 years old when evolution has taken place, or revolutionary transformational opportunities has taken the rest of the industry beyond where for example, the Air Force is. So it's a delicate balance for all of us, not just the Air Force, but I know all the services are dealing with this as well. Nonetheless, I believe the defense of our country is only as strong as our weakest link, okay, which is our real DMSMS enemy. And what is that saying? What is the enemy of good is better or best? We can't afford not to be the best with our warfighter capabilities health if defense is at stake. The bottom line here is that the Air Force listens to our users, our sustainers, our stakeholders. We do surveys like the Air Force or AFMC. We need surveys as a minimum to gather insight. We must ensure that obsolescence risks do not impact, mission, readiness, lethality, and that combatant commanders required effects in the field. Okay, all risks must be mitigated or accepted with compelling reason by our authorities. So we really need to be very, very proactive and start addressing DMSMS challenges at the earliest opportunities, whether it be via war games or other instruments. Which brings me to the second part of the question, is how do you see the new instruction impacting the Air Force? Okay, so let me frame this. I've been dealing with policy for about 10 years now at headquarters AFMC. I see this instruction being way beyond a guidebook. I see this instruction providing some authoritative language for us. So when people ask us, why are we doing what we're doing? We can reference the actual instructions and say, because we are authorized based on the language contained within this instruction. Many times our peers have asked us the question. I'm thinking now, when it comes to DMSMS, we have a better authority. In our meeting today with the Air Force DMSMS team, they asked me, how do we get Dr. Roper at the SAFAQ level to start talking about DMSMS? And I said, lean on me. Make sure I understand what it is and how we can contribute to DMSMS such that Dr. Roper could articulate it in his initiatives. Okay, so one of the concerns that I do have, of course, with the actual instruction right now is that we always focus in the Air Force on will, shall, must statements in policy. I think that, as we continue to look at this policy, I think that we need to have those authoritative statements in there as well. And I think I did an assessment and only found one will within the instruction. So if we can make this policy more of the will, shall, must at that level, I think it would help us to make it more authoritative as well. Okay, but the Air Force's policy to date, because the Air Force has been so involved in the DoD establishment of this DoDI, I found that our policy as the new guy is really in sync with what's been generated here. And I appreciate the fact that our Air Force and AFMC communities have worked hand in hand with DoD and the other services to make that a reality. So I don't see a lot of differences that we need to make when we do the rewrite, but there are some things that I'm looking at from a digital transformation perspective that I think can help us when it comes to how do we address, make DMSMS affordable earlier. Okay. My insight with digital engineering, model-based systems engineering, all of that digital ecosystem enterprise, all of that. I think as I look at this, I look at the instruction and I found one statement in there that I can focus on that I think will help us to maybe broaden our opportunities with effectuating change within the DMSMS world so that we can take advantage of all the benefits that we're espousing right here. I noticed that these just yesterday that the policy said that the evaluate DMSMS management activities and logistics and engineering processes and practices starting at the preliminary design review or equivalent. I reached out to my Air Force counterpart and we talked about this at some detail about, well, wait a minute. And Mr. Kerry Abner and I went back through the DoD 02 DoDI and started looking at, well, where is this in the actual life cycle? I know we talk about life cycle in the DoDI, but when we have statements in it that says starting at preliminary design review, I think we knock off the many opportunities that are there through the modeling, the simulation that's done prior to the PDR, all that data that's available as well that allows us to do data analytics. As far as I'm concerned, if we can start developing a posture of digital transformation, I think that it's going to revolutionize how we can address DMSMS going forward. So that's just some of the things that I've been looking at that I feel is beneficial from the policy, but adding these new things about digital transformation and making sure that it says will, shall, must will really make it more authoritative. That's pretty much all I have right now, unless people have questions about the digital transformation, digital thread, digital twin, digital ecosystems. All that's my background for 35 years, and I'm looking at leveraging that as we move forward within this DoD and Air Force DMSMS environment.
Yeah.
Over.
Great comment, Stanley. Yeah, the proof is always in the implementation, I guess, with a lot of these efforts. Setting policy guidance is an important, which this instruction is geared to do. But the key is getting it involved. How is this going to be instantiated in Air Force programs, Army programs, Navy programs? Who's going to pay for it? So those are the kind of the sticky kind of challenges that come out of any of these efforts. But you can't start without something. So having this is a good start. And but I think you're absolutely right.
Well, I think if we take advantage of the whole digital transformation initiative that the Air Force is employing, and I'm not saying that the Army, Navy, the Air Force, the Navy and Marines or that they're not doing it. I'm hoping that they are, but I think there is many opportunities on taking advantage of the early modeling and simulation and design work that was done prior to the PDR. That data in itself, if we could capture that in some DMSMS repository, okay, we could share that across all the different services and reap the benefits of all the resources that we've expended on all that due diligence prior to the PDNR. So I'm just kind of putting that out there just to kind of motivate thought so that we can start maybe transforming this a little bit further to try to make sure that we can take advantage of the things that we've been traditionally not taking advantage of. Over.
Good. All right, let's move to another service. Let's move to Eric Grothus, who works at the Navy Naval Research Surface Warfare Center and supports the Office of Deputy Secretary of the Navy for sustainment for DMSMS. He's the lead for the Navy. So my question to Eric is, I understand the Navy has had more of a traditionally decentralized approach to obsolescence, DMSMS, and some of the other services. How do you see the Navy responding to this instruction? And maybe you could interact on the question of how do we see this instantiated in Navy programs? Do you see does the instruction give us enough, give you enough leverage to do that? And what other things could be helpful to help continue to move down this path?
Yes, yeah, good question for the morning. I'm Eric Grothus. I've been doing DMSMS management for about 20 years. Started back when Robin was doing it down at NavAir. So we've been kind of working hand in glove since then. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, so why we manage it a little bit different. I know each service is diverse, but the Navy is pretty diverse in its products that we have. In our community systems. So, we have the Blue Water Navy, and then we've also got the Marine Corps under us. So it makes us a lot of different products. So we've got aircraft like the F-18, helicopters, we've got ships, carriers, submarines. We've got shipboard and ground-based radar systems. We've got missiles, munitions, and then we've got ground vehicles like tanks, MRAPs, amphibious assault vehicles. On top of that, we've got our C4I stuff. We've got our satellites and space-based systems. So We've got a huge community, and so for us, a kind of one size fits all. It's better to, our approach was to work with all those different communities at the headquarters level, set the policy, set the guidance and the requirements, and then let them implement it. We come in and help them out and give them guidance. And then when they need assistance, they come back to us, which they do regularly. We have a Navy working group, and we tackle problems that are specific to the Department of the Navy. So going back to the question is how does this instruction help? And I'm going to key on 4 points of instruction that I think were key to us. Now, the Department of the Navy has had a policy, longstanding policy that's in alignment with this, but this is really critical to reinforcing that thought and getting that solidified. So those kind of 4 points would be, makes DMSMS management mandatory. And I know that sounds like, no kidding, duh. I mean, why wouldn't it be? But like Robin alluded earlier, you got to look at what the PM's got on his plate, or his or her plate, I should say. They've got to meet performance. They got to test their aircraft or system isn't meeting performance requirements. They've got things right now that are biting them. They've got cost overruns. They've got budget decrements. They've got schedules. They've got contracts. They've got a whole host of things and initiatives that they've got to do. So DMSMS management, I can do tomorrow, right? And now, as Robin said, it's going to cost me more. So to kind of tee this up as a mandatory thing, it puts it back on the PM's plate and says, hey, this is critical. Get on it now, and so puts the focus back up front. Risk-based process is key. We do that same thing with counterfeit management, which is related, but having a risk-based process, instead of looking at my whole entire bill of materials across all those millions of systems I talked about, now we do a risk assessment. We look at, hey, which ones are the ones that are going to bite in the tail, and put my resources on those. Not saying that the other ones won't get us, but if I focus on the big high-dollar ones and the ones that we know are at risk every time for going obsolete, then we can focus on those, put our resources on those items. So again, having a risk-based process where before we just said, hey, everybody manage it, I think makes it much more realistic and lets the PM put his resources where he needs to be. Requirement for a DMSMS management plan, it requires the PM to think through the processes and develop them and document them. And it makes the PM accountable too, because in the Department of Navy, we do independent logistics assessments. We go through and we assess our programs, the key milestones, BC, full rate production, and out through sustainment. And so it makes our, the PM and the PM staff have to maintain their process and keep them up and keep their plans going. So it holds their kind of feet to the fire. Let me say one thing about a DMSMS management plan that is a trap, however, is in the past, we've had programs that they'll hire out to one of the support contractors and say, hey, make me a management plan, right? And so they'll take a template, throw one out there, and it really doesn't have much to do with the management process overall. So in order to be effective, they have to be done by the PSM, led by the PSM, the logistics manager. And they've got to be done with his team and developed by those folks who know what the unique challenges of that program is. So standard template, just putting it out there that has the words, we're going to have a team and do all these good things, isn't really helpful. Finally, I think the fourth one requires metrics. Metrics are one of those things that nobody likes to do, but they're important. How do you measure yourself, right? How does you apply that to anything? How does a pitcher measure his progress? He's got a radar gun, so he starts throwing out at a certain speed and measures his process to see if he's getting faster. Same thing with us. How many redesigns are we doing? What's it costing us? If we put processes in place, are we driving those things down? So those are the 4 key points. I think one last thought that I have is that DMSMS management needs to be a joint effort between the program office and the contractor. You can't one side do it and not be successful without the other side. So to get a plug-in for one of our other products that Robin led would be SD26, which is a DMSMS management contracts guide. So that's a pretty good document. It's a real good document. I've been using that with some of our new programs, and just getting the right contractual requirements, bids, and procedurals up front has been really key. And I think that's one of the key thoughts too, is if you start that process early, getting those things on contract will make you successful. So kind of wrap it up, having a mandate is really key to having an effective process. And again, the best programs we've seen in the Department of Navy for DMSMS management are not the ones who spend the most money or have the thickest plans. It's the ones who carefully think out the processes, figure out what's important, what's at risk, and work to that. So that's what I've got for you, and back over to you, Robin.
Great, Eric. Hey, thanks very much for that. And we got one specific question that came in from Ricky Sykes. The Navy is going to the model-based product support, the product lifecycle management tool. Will the entire DoD obsolescence data be available to all programs? Basically, sharing obsolescence data across DoD. Are you familiar with that? And is that can you answer that?
I am familiar with the tools, yeah, it's a great question. So the Navy, unlike the Air Force and I think the Army, those folks, like I know the Air Force requires AFCOM, they've got a centralized part. We don't. We've got our warfare centers. We've got about 4 or 5 of them. They're centers of excellence in DMSMS management. They're specific to a community type. You know, Crane's got the surface warfare. Keyport has the more of the undersea warfare stuff. So for us, unfortunately, we've got some really sharp, probably some of the best SMEs in the department. Having said that, we don't share case data. Robin's that's been a crusade for her. We have tried that and we have not gotten there, but we're not going to let that go. But I don't know that the model-based system is going to solve that immediately. I think we've got to link up those systems. So.
Okay, fair enough. Let me move to our last panelist, and we've already got 15 questions queued up in addition to the ones we've already answered, so we want to get to those. So here, Dr. Stephen Foster is the DMSMS lead for DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. He's been working, these issues in his time at DLA, but prior to being at DLA, he worked on the position of materials manager for 3 coalition camps during Operation Iraqi Freedom from 25 to 2011. And what I'd like to ask Stephen on the DLA is responsible for sourcing and delivering hundreds of thousands or probably hundreds of millions of parts to all parts of the globe. How do you anticipate this instruction will impact your work in the coming years? So, Stephen, over to you.
All right, well, thank you for letting me join the panel. I'm kind of in the same boat with Dr. Rogers. I'm relatively new to the DMS world, although not to the supply chain. So with that impact of this instruction, I think it's going to help in the sense that it's going to help define the roles and help with a lot of the communication and cooperation among the DMS community. As you mentioned, DLA, we manage millions of parts. We're not say at the systems level. We're at the 40,000 foot view where we're managing really by NSN. We have a dedicated team. We're based in Columbus, Ohio, with Land and Maritime, but we work DMS cases across the spectrum for all of DLA, for any of the parts we manage, and sometimes not even direct parts. We've had some contact with foreign military sales and assistance with that. But we're excited with the new instruction. We're working on our overarching plan for DLA. I think primarily there's a few different points in it that I think that'll help. First, I think it's going to guide and help standardize the needs for the different system managers when they come to us with the DMS issues. Because what we do, when we get a DMS issue, we research, and of course we try to find parts, alternatives, what have you, make recommendations to try to satisfy that need. If we can't, of course we let them know. If there's parts that are available, then we try to do an end of life or life of type buy to stock those parts. And what we run into in that particular instance is, I think the management plan is going to help standardize the tools and the processes at the systems level. So when they come to us with the needs, because we'll coordinate with all the services through our DMS community, our POCs, when we coordinate those with the different entities in the services, they'll have a firm, solid foundation of their needs, as opposed to perhaps one area, one service giving us an estimate of what they would need for an end of life buy. They can have a solid foundation, either statistically, what's the usage rates over a given time period, using engineering data, what's the mean time between failures versus the expected runtime, and then using a set confidence level on how many parts they expect they're going to use in that time frame, and various methods like that. That's the kind of data we need to make good, educated buys for these parts, and to stock them. As with anybody, of course, there's always budgeting issues. And what we see is, the purse strings are just getting tighter. So we have to have that solid data when we make the recommended buys to support these systems. So I think that's probably the first point that the management plan is going to assist with, is it's going to help standardize and have some level of consistency on those needs for those programs, which we ask for when we do DMS cases. It also, secondly, the guide up section. We primarily get the majority of our DMS notifications from guide up. It's a useful tool. I would say probably 90 to 95% of our cases come through guide up. If we can further standardize that, perhaps mandate it or make sure it's being done, we have the time frames in which we get the guide up notices, because time is really of the essence with in our aspect with the DMS cases. Typically we get the guide up notifications, and the vast majority of contractors or activities will give us 90 days, 180 days, sometimes even a year out on parts. Other times we've had some as few as 5 days or 15 days on a guide up notice, that they're ceasing production, or it's a final order date, final buy date. So if we can have more of a focus on guide up to try to avoid that. Of course, some instances can't be avoided. Surprisingly, there are a lot of small companies out there that make extremely critical items for major weapon systems. We put together a report recently, just kind of citing some of the examples that's kind of given us cause for concern because it was last minute buys that we've had to present that were all, say, more than $250,000. And we really had less than 30 days to evaluate it, to coordinate among the services, and then to try to generate a PR to stock these parts to be able to take care of those weapon systems. And in some instances, sometimes it can't be avoided. I remember one specifically, an employee was retiring suddenly, and this employee was the only employee with this company that had the intrinsic knowledge to create this part. How do you plan for that? How do you prepare for that? It's tough. So just to go back and touching on that line, to go back again to Robin's original question that she answered, I'm in complete concurrence that the earlier that you can plan and budget in the life cycle of the system, the better, because it will help avoid these things. Unless you run into the unexpected matters. Dr. Rogers mentioned when you run into, what happens when you expand the life on a airframe. We push it out 20 years. Well, now all the associated parts that we had a DMS plan in for, now we've just added 20 years to that. So now we have to reevaluate. We just have to know. The earlier we know, the better. And I think the management plan is going to build on, once again, that communication and collaboration among the DMS community, with DLA, with the services, and industry also. That's probably the two major points. Overall, like I said, we're looking forward to the plan's implementation. We're working on our specific putting pen to paper to get our plan in effect.
Great. Oh, great. Thanks very, very much, Stephen. And thanks for all your great comments. We got a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to now open it up to all of you all. I'm going to combine a couple questions here, one from Justin Doubleday and then one from Charles Borland. One is sort of a level-setting question. What are some of the kind of DMSMS challenges that you deal with every day? Is there a lexicon? I would guess there's probably one of the guidebooks. Is it SD26 that has, what are those specific kind of common things? And then if you want to respond to that in general, and then specifically, Charles asks, like being in industry, working on active contracts, will this new policy impact already funded executing programs, and how do we expect updating requirements to be flowed down going forward? So open those two up to any of you all.
I can kind of address really the first part of that question. One of the things that we see at DLA, and keep in mind we're not at the systems level, but what we see when we work on a DMS issue and we might find a source or go back to a manufacturer to produce something, we may only see a requirement or a need or a back order. A lot of times back orders will generate our DMS cases also. We may have a back order for 5 parts. We only need 5 parts. This is the lifetime of this, this vehicle, this system. The problem is we'll find a manufacturer, but of course in the manufacturing community, they can't / don't want to make 5 parts. They'll have a minimum production run. So they may have a minimum production run of 100 parts. So that's really, which consequently, now you're looking at substantially more than what we want to spend. And also, in theory, we're going to have parts on the shelf that we know we'll never use. So those are hard questions. Those are hard questions and hard decisions that a lot of people that work on higher floors than myself, that they have to make in the budgeting to determine if they want to make those buys or not. So that's some of the issues that we deal with at DLA.
Hey, Jerry, can I add to that? So some of the questions, both of those questions, especially the first one, is really hard to answer. For the over 20 years that I've been doing this, there's never really been a requirement for DMSMS management or keeping records and keeping metrics and keeping statistics. So one of the things that I'm hopeful, now that there is that requirement, I'm hopeful that I'm able to gather that information. In the 5 years that I've been the lead for OSD, I've been asked that many times. So what are your top 10 challenges? What's causing, DoD, the services, to pull their hair out? How much money is DoD spending on DMSMS management? How much money is DoD spending on resolutions? And I haven't been able to answer those questions very easily. I unfortunately don't have a tool where I can plug in a part and see across DoD which services are affected. So in order to get to that place, I believe this instruction is going to help, because not only are we for the first time being required to share discontinuation notices, which we're looking at maybe creating a standardized format for those in GuideApp, but also resolutions, which will foster collaboration, I believe. And I noticed there was a question about, how can we better share information across DoD, so that many times I have seen duplication of effort. So parts are parts. So program office in one of the services, or even within its own service, may have already solved, found a resolution for an issue that they already have. So what my goal is by being able to gather information within GuideApp, and then also have, the services and the program offices start keeping records, I'll be able to start being able to answer some of those questions that you all have, that I've had forever as well. I am happy to say, though, that there are a lot less decentralized, or a lot less databases out there. For example, the Army has a centralized team. They use a case management database called MORE. The Air Force has a centralized team. They use a centralized database for case management called AVCOM. Like Eric said, the Navy has multiple centers of excellences, 4 or 5, but each one of them use a database as well. So I don't think in the future it's going to be too difficult to try to figure out a way. And GuideApp is kind of my baby step right now in doing that, but not reinventing the wheel. I don't want to fix what ain't broken, because honestly, you all are doing outstanding jobs with your case management databases and tools that you're using. But in the future, try to figure out a way to connect all of that, so that we can have a system where we plug in a part number, and maybe it looks at all of the databases, and that information can be shared across DoD. So that is my goal in the future, and this is just the starting point to get to that place.
This is Daphne Henry. From an Army perspective, I would say 2 challenges that we actually experience, in addition to some that have already been mentioned, would be the lack of clarity when it comes to responsibilities. And I was so grateful that Robin really took time at the beginning, really outlining the responsibilities section, which is section 2 of this instruction. So I really believe this instruction will greatly enhance clarifying roles and responsibilities throughout the whole process. The other challenge I would say that we have currently would be the omission or vagueness of policies that reflect proactive obsolescence or DMSMS management. And as Robin indicated, each of the first line under responsibilities really indicates that establish, develop, and implement integrated risk-based proactive policy, procedures, regulation, guidance, and training. So I think having that as one of the key responsibilities for each area that's included in this instruction will make sure that helps to address that current challenge, especially that piece on the training piece. I think that's going to help the Army, from the Army perspective. Over.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? Okay, we'll go to another question. This is from Kevin Hennebury. He breaks DMSMS into two parts, managing obsolescence and fixing obsolescence. So that's sort of resolving or mitigating, identifying and mitigating the obsolescence issues. And specifically when bidding on a 5-year production RFP, for instance, where DMSMS is considered in scope and needs to be included in the bid price, is it appropriate to have both parts as in scope or just part one, including part two, that is fixing obsolescence can introduce unnecessary inflated proposal prices due to trying to price the unknown. Any thoughts on that?
Can I bother you to say that one more time? I didn't take it all in.
Yeah, sure. Let's see if I can find it again.
And while you're looking for it, this is Stan Rogers here. Being that I'm new to this environment, one of the things I want to make sure of is that these questions that are being put before us, that we make sure that we get copies of these, because I want to be able to make sure I can take it back to my Air Force community to make sure that I can kind of dig deeper into all these questions as well, to make sure I'm prepared to be able to address whatever the outcome should be for these questions as well. Over.
Great point. Charlie, who's my master on this, do we have the ability to do that?
Oh, I'll look into it. I think there's a way to do that one way or another.
Okay, we'll see if we can do that. But some of these are a bit specific. All right, so a couple of people were asking questions around. I mean, we're talking about including DMSMS in plans and program development. People are asking, like, wasn't this already a requirement? And then the bigger question, I think Stanley is the one that alluded to this in his comments. How do we enforce this? Because I've done a lot of work in the area of foreign military sales, and that's also a requirement for programs. But sometimes those requirements, in the cost-cutting areas down the road, end up on the cutting room floor. So some reactions to that about, specifically, were management plans for obsolescence required previously, and how do we get this kind of instruction to really get some teeth behind it for programs?
So, Eric, I'll jump in first here. So, for the Navy, we've required them since probably the mid-2000s. It was not required for the broader department until later. But having said that, having a DoD requirement up top just gives it more get up. I mean, they carry, Department of Navy is going to carry the same weight across our PMs, but then having that Department of Defense policy that when they come back doesn't say, hey, we've been told that, statutory things are kind of what we're supposed to focus on and those kind of things. This is a Navy regulatory thing. It certainly helps having the just solidifies that argument that, hey, look, if the DoD requirement flows down, this is how we implement it. And so, so that answered that for the Navy. Haven't gone to compliance. So, like I said, we look at that during our independent logistics assessments, which is a review we do in milestone BC full rate production every 5 years. But you also should, I mean, if you look at the different setter events, your CDR, PDR, PRR, and even your MRAs, you should be looking at that. Now, of course, those setters, you're looking at the contractor's plan. Typically, it's going to be a CEDRL, right? Hopefully using DSD 26 as a guide. But the contractor's plan should be assessed there, and in conjunction with that, you should be looking at the government plan to see if they correlate. And if they don't, then you're going to write an RFA, request for action, right? Or, general terms, you're going to write findings. So I think there's several checkpoints. The key is to actually do them and go after it. So that'd be my short story real quick. When we first put out the requirement, we required all our ACAT 1 and 2 programs to send in their plans. That was back in 2005. We graded them and gave them back and told them whether they're good or bad. But since then, we don't do that anymore. Like I said, we check them at our ILAs and our different systems engineering reviews. Over.
Great. Hey, I got one group of questions. There are several questions around the one of the points in the instruction, Robin, on DCMA. Specifically, how will DCMA, quote, surveil the contractor's activities, end quote. A couple of folks asked, what does that mean? Is that an audit? You know, there are timelines associated with these milestones. So any thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, so I actually reached out to DCMA just recently, and I am willing, because I know that we're running out of time. So Jerry, I just wanted to say we could have another town hall in the future to answer all of these questions, or I could incorporate, do another outreach as part of my working group to answer all of these questions, and actually have DCMA and industrial policy folks on the phone to answer some of these questions. But basically, it's my understanding that DCMA executes risk-based surveillance of a contractor's contract costs, product, services, processes, and systems. They have a plan, do, check, act kind of framework. And what they're telling me is that this method supports the overall assessment of the contractor's performance, progress, or compliance to requirements. And we can find more information on this surveillance and what that means by looking at the DCMA manual, which is 2303-01, entitled Surveillance. And so presently, DCMA has been actually doing the surveillance of DMSMS, and it's accomplished by their engineers as this system process falls under their engineering surveillance. So the gist of it is they are already looking at DMSMS management plans and trying to figure out what the requirements are and whether or not contractors are meeting those requirements. They're using several checklists and other surveillance tools, which are aligned to the SAE standard 0016 on DMSMS management plans. And they've provided me with a checklist of all the things that they have been currently looking at. And I have another strategic objective project that I'm working on to work with them to expand that checklist if need be. And then also not only do that, but provide them with subject matter experts in DMSMS if need be to help them do this surveillance. So I hope that that's at least the starting point of opening this DCMA discussion and having them answer some questions in the future.
Okay. Well, listen, we're really running out of time here. What I wanted to do was give you all a chance for, those panelists that want to say about 30 seconds or less closing thoughts, and then I'll wrap it up.
Okay, so this is Stan Rogers. I know I addressed two issues, that being will, shall, must for compliance. I hope that we can address that when it comes to the policy, because that's going to be, I guess, the key things, especially in the Air Force. When we start talking about complying to something, those are the words that they're looking for. So I'm either hoping that we can have an action item or make sure that we get an update to the policy, unless it's determined that it should not be in there. Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing too, where it talks about the preliminary design review, I like to better understand why it says starting at preliminary design review, so we can try to make sure that we get full coverage across the life cycle at Wells, because I think there's opportunities to reap significant benefits if we start way before the preliminary design review. Over.
Daphne, go ahead.
Oh, yes, this is Daphne. Just wanted to say for closing comments, it's kind of almost like the question the kids ask when you're traveling, how much further? I think the question that we should be asking at this point is, where do we go from here, as one of my colleagues often says. And I would say from the Army perspective, just realize that the discussions will continue. Actually, in tomorrow's forum, the best practice meeting, we will have it as a standing agenda item for a while. We'll actually have it on our outreach Wednesdays as needed. So I think the the where we go from here is realizing that we'll have continued discussions and really with the Army strong mindset that we'll collaborate and we'll do it together. Over.
That's a really great point. So I think we'll close with that. And what I recommend, Robin, to your point about follow-up on questions, I think a good way to do this would be we're going to be sending out the slides. A number of folks have asked for. We're going to send it out to all the registrants. So if you want to identify a time that you want to do a follow-up industry, not industry day, but follow-on town hall and include some of these broader folks like DCMA and IP, industrial policy. I think that would be great for you all to do that. And what we could do is we could send out if you want to pick a date and time, and we can, when we send out the slides, we can do this to all the folks that registered for today's event. Now the question for you is, if it's government only, you need to know that. So then we can, but if industry's allowed, then, it's good to know so that, you can do a follow-on discussion. But I think that's probably the best way to approach it. Does that sound good for you?
Yes, it sure does. And I always include industry because we can't do this without them. And we need their perspective, and this is teamwork between government and industry. Great.
So I think
Jerry, this is Bill. Just a real quick question. Will the questions and answers be provided with the slides to the attendees?
I wasn't planning on doing the Q&A with the Q&A. I was going to get to you all, the panelists. The slides have already, I think, they'll be sent out as soon later today to all the registrants. The Q&A, I think it would be probably best to go to you all, and then that can be part of the follow-on session that you all do with. I think it's best to do it with your kind of through Robin's kind of working group and bring in others. This has been. We had almost 500 people signing on this event. By the day, we still have 350 on, so that's pretty darn amazing. And we're 3 minutes over. So apologies if we can get to all the questions or the chat, but it was an honor to have all your great Robin and all the service leads and Bill from DAU. It was a tremendous opening conversation on this instruction. As you all said, there's lots of work to do and on implementation, but I think it's a great way to start it. And you got the framework now, so now we can go off and get obsolescence kind of cool again. So and get it straight. All right, thanks very much for all your time, and it was great to do this to George Mason, and we'll again follow up with the briefing and identify a follow-on session with Robin and her team. Okay.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have
all.
a great
Thank you.
day.